Should you pay someone to do your taxes, or should you just do them yourself? Simple question. What's the answer? Scott Schaefer is here, and we'll discuss it starting right now.
This is Debt Free in 30. Here's your host, Doug Hoyes.
Scott, welcome back. How are you doing today?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Let's talk tax. So, first question, and this is perhaps a stupid, well, in fact, I know you're going to tell me this is a stupid question, but I'm going to ask it anyways. Why do we even bother filing taxes? So, I am an employee of Hoyes Michaelis and Associates, as you are. We get a T4 slip. That T4 slip is in the government's computer. So at the end of the year, they know how much money I've made. So why don't they just say, oh, well, we know how much you've made. Here's how much you owe. Bing, bang, boom. Why do I even have to file taxes?
Okay, so the simple answer is we live in a self-assessment system, which means you have to file your return. You have to send it in for yourself. And the government assesses to say, yes, now I agree with your number. But it's a little bit more complicated than that, because really it's just not your income. You also get to claim deductions, you get to claim credits, you get to claim different other parts, and the government doesn't know if you have other income, such as self-employed income or any other form of income. So there's many components that go into it.
And so it is to my advantage to file taxes if there are deductions that I could otherwise be claiming that the government wasn't aware of.
Correct.
And they're never going to give me deductions that they don't know about. They'll include all my income that they know about, so it could backfire on me by not doing them.
Correct. Yeah. If they just assess, or if they just filed your return based upon your T4 income, they're missing all the other credits that you could claim: RSP contributions, your daycare,
rent, medical expenses,
you name it, all that stuff,
all that kind of stuff. So okay, so there's a reason why we have to do that. And when I do my taxes, I use a computer program to do it, and there's this button I can push to suck in all the information. So my T4s and everything else gets sucked in automatically. So it's actually a fairly simple process once you're linked in with CRA. So I guess it's kind of a quasi, they're kind of doing it sort of themselves.
Correct.
And then I fill in what they don't know, and off we go.
Correct.
So
they verify the information that you send them.
Okay, cool. So we're going to talk about a bunch of that stuff. Now, here's why I'm interested in this question. Let's get to the real part of the show here. More than a third of our clients, so that's people who file a consumer proposal or a bankruptcy with Hoyes Michaelis, owe money to Canada Revenue Agency at the time they file a bankruptcy or consumer proposal. And for many of them, taxes are a very significant debt. Owing taxes can be a result of many factors. Very common one is I worked at more than one job.
Correct.
And so each job said, oh, you made this much, you're in the 20% tax bracket, but when you add all the jobs together, I'm in the 30% tax bracket, I owe more money. Another common example would be I retired partway through the year and I started getting a pension. I got a lump sum, severance or something when I left, so there was more taxes on that, and then my pension, which isn't getting full taxes. So there's a bunch of reasons why you can end up owing taxes, and of course the main one is probably being self-employed.
Right.
So you and I have met with thousands of people over the years, because you've been doing this a while as well. And we have them make a plan to deal with their current debt.
Right.
Let's deal with it. But then, of course, part of the plan has to be to stay current with your taxes in the future.
Correct. There's no point getting out of debt if you go right back into tax debt.
Absolutely right. So that's one of the things we want to talk about today. So in order to stay up to date, you've got to keep filing your taxes.
Correct.
And so the question today is, well, am I better off just doing them myself, or am I better off having someone else do that? And so I'm going to give you the arguments for both sides here.
Correct.
I've done advanced prep. I have it on my cue cards
Perfect.
right here. Some people tell me that, well, I fell behind on filing my taxes and now I owe a lot of money and I can't catch up. And if I had someone else doing my taxes, I wouldn't have got into trouble. Makes perfect sense to me, because if I am IT worker, construction worker, something like that, who's self-employed, I'm probably not an expert in doing taxes, so having someone else do them would really help. Yep. Alternatively, I've met with a bunch of other people who had someone else doing their taxes, and that someone else screwed it up. Either it was a family member or something who was doing them who really wasn't qualified, or I've met with two people in the last week who had actual bookkeepers, accounting professionals who were supposed to be doing them, and they screwed it up.
Right.
So it's like, well, I should have done them myself then. So you got two sides of this. Sometimes I do them myself and that gets screwed up. I have somebody else doing them and they get screwed up. So let's get back to the question then. How do I decide whether I should do them myself or whether I should have someone else do them?
Right.
And in my mind, you and I talked about this in advance and you gave me some ideas. I think the first issue is, well, how complex it is it?
Right, because the more complex it is, the more help you need. The less complex it is, the less necessary outside help you would need to do that.
So if I just get a T4 and that's it, I don't have any deductions, I don't have any kids, I don't have any rental, whatever,
Yep.
you can probably do it yourself.
Or even if you had a couple of those minor ones, the tax programs now can walk you through it. They're question-based programs, and so there are times that if you're relatively straightforward, you got a couple things on it, it's very easy. You don't necessarily have to pay a lot of money for that.
So we're going to talk about different tax programs before we're done here. What would be an example of a complex return then?
Yeah, so key ones are self-employed people, people with disability credits for themselves, their kids, or their parents, people who are supporting family members. You get different things. So anytime there's more than your normal just employment income and a few common deductions, there are so many credits out there that the government gives for people with unique situations. So as soon as you have some uniqueness to your situation, you may want to get a little bit more help. Whether you pay a lot of money for that or just get some guidance for it is a question, but you definitely don't want to miss this thing. So if you can spend $50 to recover an extra $250, that's not a bad investment.
And so if I was to go to a typical tax preparer, okay, and I guess the biggest one in the country is H&R Block,
Right.
who are not a sponsor of this show, but if they're watching and would like to sponsor us, then they can send me a check. There are a whole bunch of other companies like that in every town across
Correct,
Canada.
especially during tax season. There's a bunch of them
They
pop
all
up.
pop up. So if I've got a relatively simple return, I got a couple of T4s, I got a rental receipt, whatever, what do you think is a reasonable amount for me to be paying to have someone do it?
Generally, I find people are paying $100 or less to do a tax return.
Okay.
The key is make sure when you meet with somebody, you explain to them all the factors. I mean, a tax preparer will just type the numbers in the computer system based upon information you give. So don't be afraid to ask lots of questions.
Gotcha. So if I've got a really complex situation, then it's going to cost more than that likely.
Yep.
Now, I was going to save this to the end, but let's just jump right into it, and then we'll go back to my original question. So what types of tax programs are out there that someone can use? So is there a way to do your taxes completely for free?
There's the online programs that you can use that are free, that are either fee per service usages, where you can only do so many returns before it costs you more, or you put initial investment into it. You just bought $20 package, and then you can do so many returns. There are some free, and there's some that are fee per use. You can do so many returns. You can do additional returns, but the more complex they are, the more cost would be involved in it.
Gotcha. Okay, so why should I consider having someone else do my tax return? The first one is complexity. You just talked about
Correct.
that. I got a whole bunch of things, and that's something I should think about. The next one would be expertise.
Correct.
So you and I happen to be chartered accountants. We're CPAs. So we've been trained in how to do taxes. I do my own personal tax return.
Correct.
and
As
for all-
do I as
and
well.
for all my family. I don't change the oil in my car.
Correct. I do not touch electrical. I do not touch plumbing. I was raised by an accountant, so I'm very comfortable. My expertise are in accounting, but I want to do things that are outside of it. So to me, if somebody does not have the expertise in a certain area, then maybe you ask for help in that.
And that's a kind of a self-assessment thing. Do I think I can do this on my
Correct.
own or not?
Do they make sense to me? RSPs, tax-free savings accounts, deductions, credits, non-refundable tax credits, overpayments of CPP. Do all these things make sense to you that logically that you could answer questions on that? If they do, you have some expertise. If all of that feels overwhelming and complex, then definitely get some help on it, because the ripple effect is this affects people's child tax benefit, affects their tax refunds, affects many other parts, because a tax return is the return. It's important, but it spins out to other programs of the government.
Yeah, and taxes are something that happen once a year.
Correct.
So if I learn how to do it, well, it's going to be another year before I do it again. Things are going to change, different programs, whatever. Whereas a tax preparer is going to do 100 of them this year. They're going to be
Correct.
doing them, throughout the year probably. So they've got a bit more expertise. So is it something you want to spend your time learning how to do?
Right.
And then you're not going to do it again for another year. And again, if you got a simple situation, absolutely do it yourself.
Correct.
But if not, then
Yep. Yeah, and when we talk about the programs, we'll talk about where there are some that I think people could go to if they want to do it on their own.
Okay, so we're going to talk about programs. So complexity, expertise. The other one, I guess, is time.
Correct. Tax season is a very short window. It's a couple-month period of time. So do you have the time to even consider this?
Yeah, and if you're a self-employed person, you got to pull together all your receipts and expenses and everything. That's usually what takes the most time.
Correct.
And even if you're having an accountant or bookkeeper do them, well, you got to pull that together and give it to them. Do you want to then be spending the time doing, all of the rest of the work?
Correct.
And you're right. It's in Canada, you have to have your taxes, if you're a normal employed person, filed by April 30th.
April 30th is when the tax returns are due, or the tax payment is due. So they do allow self-employed people to do their tax returns up into June 15th without the late filing penalty, the 5% charge. But the amount the amount owing on your taxes is due April 30th, May 1st.
Yeah.
So you're still, even though your taxes may not be filed before then, you are required to pay the balance. Well, how do you pay the balance if you don't know what the number is?
Yeah, so you kind of have to have them done by April 30th.
Correct.
So.
And the more you delay, the bigger the balance, the harder it comes on to getting on a payment plan. You're just deferring that part if there is a tax debt. So earlier is better for filing taxes.
Yeah, and if you have a T4 slip and some other stuff, or you've got investment receipts or daycare receipts or whatever, you may not actually receive those till the end of February.
They're due to be mailed by the end of February, but some people put into RSPs. That slip won't come in until later on in March. So it may take some time for all your slips to arrive. So might be able to file at the start of March. It might be later March, early April to get those filed.
Yeah, and so if I get my final RSP slip on, March the 20th.
Correct.
Well, I've only got till April 30th to get everything done. I've got a 5-week window there to get everything done, get everything filed.
Well,
if that happens to be the time when, I'm busy at work or my kid gets sick and a bunch of other stuff happens, I still got to get it done and be done on time.
Correct. And if you are putting in RSPs, you're probably creating a refund. The sooner you get that done, the sooner you get that money in your hand, so you're able to use it to deal with other stuff.
So if I decide to have someone else do it, then the next obvious question is, well, who? Who do I get to do it? So if I decide to delegate this to someone else, well, I could have my family member do it.
Yep.
Which is what happens in your and my family. I end up doing my, father's taxes and my son's taxes and my wife's taxes.
Because they go to the expert in that area.
That's right. Although my wife is a chartered accountant, so she could probably be doing this herself. She's smarter than me, which is why she has me do them, I think.
Right.
So do I need a CA, a CPA? Do I need a bookkeeper? Do I need a special tax accountant? Do I need a tax lawyer? Or is someone like H&R Block or one of these tax preparers enough? How do I make that decision?
Correct. I think we go back to those three topics we talked about: the complexity, the expertise, and the timing. So ultimately, if you need to get your taxes done, the more complex it is, the more higher level person you need. So if you're running a big corporation where there's corporate tax returns, there's personal taxes, you're paying dividends, you're doing other stuff in there, you probably want a professional. You probably want a CPA or a CA to do that and help you through it, because there's many things that they can help you with that. That's more complex. So if you're making lots of money, then that could be well invested. If we keep alluding to the people who just have slips, the T4 slips, maybe they have their child care, their RSP contributions, have a few deductions for medical and things like that. Well, places like H&R Block or the Liberties, the people that do taxes year round, are great for helping people through those. Go in and ask for your slips, or with your slips, explain your situation, tell them about your situation. They'll have the expertise for doing it. Also comes back to timing. Do you have time to shop the market to ask somebody? So think about how complex it is. How much expertise do you think you need for your knowledge and the person you're talking to? And then the timing. If your knowledge is really high when it comes to tax programs and things like that, you may not need to be as sophisticated for a higher level accountant to do that.
Yeah, and as to timing, it's never a good idea on April 29th to walk in and say, hey, can you do my taxes? Because that's when they are at peak busy.
Correct.
So if you can do them in advance, the sooner you get it to them, the better. And Hoyes Michaels and Associates Inc. is a corporation. I have a tax accountant who we've been using for 20 years. So even though I could probably figure out how to do a corporate tax return, I'm going to do one of them a year.
And once again, your situation is a little bit more complex. You have a corporation, so it's more than just doing a tax return at that point. You're also doing some tax planning. So for an individual that is an employee, very little tax planning needs to go into it, because really, when you think about filing taxes, it's filing the return. But then do you need to plan out the next year? An employee has taxes taken off. They have their CPP, their EI, and their taxes taken off throughout the year. So they really don't need to plan for that. For people that run businesses, you should be planning out next year's taxes as well. Plan out your income sources. Plan out how things are going to go. You're going to think about when and how I'm going to pay my HST, my corporate taxes, if there's employees involved. So there's a lot more that goes involved into that one. So that definitely want the higher expertise to do the taxes plus the tax planning.
Yeah, and our corporation pays installments.
Correct.
Because it's like, okay, we know that next year we're going to owe X number of dollars. So and the government will tell you based on last year's tax return, well, you got to pay this much every month, every quarter, however it works.
Right.
And that's something that I'm quite happy to have an expert look at and tell me to make sure I'm doing it right.
And that applies to individuals too. If anybody owes more than $3,000 in taxes, their tax balance owing is more than $3,000 in 1 year, the next year the government expects you to pay tax installments. So what they're trying to do is equalize the people that have taxes taken off all year long with a person who's self-employed and is holding their money and then trying to pay it at the end.
So, sorry, you said the limit was $1,000?
$3,000.
$3,000. So if I do my taxes this year and my taxes owing is more than $3,000,
correct.
And if I'm not an employee, if it's not withheld at source, then the government says you got to be paying as you go.
You got to pay tax installments next year. It'll be divided, then the amount from last year divided in 4 installments.
Right. So if I ended up owing $4,000 this year, then okay, I got to pay $1,000 every quarter leading up to next year.
Assuming, once again, this goes back to the tax planning, assuming you're going to be in the same position next year. If you end up changing, you were self-employed and now you say, you know what, it's not for me, I want to be an employee, I want to keep it simple. At that point, you'll have taxes taken off. You don't have to pay the installments. You pay the installments to prepay your taxes. If you don't pay them, you got to pay installment interest. If this stuff is overwhelming somebody, that's a sign that you need expertise.
Yeah, if you're not understanding what we're saying, then okay, this is the time to get someone involved. So, yeah, because if I end up switching to be an employee, well, I don't need to pay installments anymore because it's coming off my taxes.
Correct.
Or it's coming off my paycheck. On the other hand, if my income's going way up, well, I'm going to owe even more next year. Maybe I should be throwing a lot more into the installments.
Correct.
I don't legally have to, but I'm going to owe a lot more. So at the very least, I should at least be tucking it away or whatever. So
when I think about it, the question became when we started, should you pay somebody? If paying somebody will get you the proper return back and make sure you've applied for all the credits, that's a good investment. If you can spend money to save money or to get more money back, that's a great investment. Self-employed people, if this is outside of their box, definitely get somebody because they're missing deductions, they're missing different parts of it. So definitely want to be on that for sure, and that's a great time to be paying somebody.
Yeah, and if you end up being late and getting whacked with penalties and interest, and it ends up costing you a few $1,000 in penalties and interest, correct, paying somebody a few $100 to have done your return and getting you set up is a no-brainer, a good deal. So, tax programs then. Can you give us any thoughts on that? And again, we're not here to recommend or endorse any particular tax program. We're not getting paid. This isn't some hidden affiliate program where we're mentioning tax programs. We have no vested interest in any particular program. But if someone is watching out there, what advice would you give them?
So, the way I like to categorize the tax programs, there's two types. There's one that are for the experts. So the tax program we use and have used it for years is we enter the information based upon what we have. We got to go to the slip, we have to enter it because we know all the different T slips. You know, for tuition, it's a T2202A. So when you think about it, these are codes that we have, so we need to go and look for it and enter it. For individuals who are a relatively straightforward situation, they're question-based programs. So you don't have to know where to put stuff on your tax return. You have to answer questions. With those questions, pop into where you put the information. So, you know, different ones like UFile or I'm trying to think of some of the other ones. There's NetFile, there's UFile, there's different ones you can buy off the box, a shelf program. They are question-based. Are you an employee? You hit yes. They say, what was your T4 earnings? So you put that in there. Do you have kids? Yes, put your children information in there. So question-based stuff. So people who want to do it themselves, that's the best way to go. With a lot of those, they have a paid portion on it, which you can say, I will pay somebody to review it for me. So you can actually do it yourself. So you kind of get the best of both worlds. You do the return yourself, but then you can pay an expert to quickly look at it before you file it.
Yeah, and I personally have been using UFile for years and years and years.
Correct.
And all my accounting buddies laugh at me because they go, well, that's one of these question-based programs. You wrote the book, right? You should know how to do the fancy stuff. And I say, you know what? I do taxes once a year, and I do, 5 or 6 returns for family members and whatnot. And I find UFile is dead easy because it's exactly what you say. You go in, and because I've used it in the past, I say, okay, let's do the 2019 return this year. And it says, okay, let's suck in all the information from last year.
Right.
Did your name change? Did your address change? It carries forward things like capital gain schedules and capital loss schedules.
all the generic stuff, all the stuff that would be carry forward information. You don't have to re-input it.
And so it already knows what my, TFSA limit was from last year, my RSP limit, whatever. And then there's also a button on there that says, do you want to autofill from CRA? So I've already registered for a CRA account. It's all linked up. I hit go, boom, it puts my T4 in.
Right.
And then you're right. It asks you a bunch of questions. Are you an employee? Are you married? Do you have kids? Do you have self-employment income? Do you have medical expenses? Do you have boom, boom, boom? Yes, yes, yes. Okay, then it will ask you questions based on that. So, you're an employee? Great. pull out your T4, here, put this box in this box, this number in this box, and so on.
Yep.
So even I can figure it out.
And the key is not to rush. Take your time. Don't be overwhelmed. Everything's box 14 is employment income.
Yep.
Box 22 is your tax deductions, tax withheld. So follow it, go slowly, make sure you're looking at it.
And the beauty of it is this is a web-based program, so I don't have to install any software. I'm automatically using the brand new version of the software,
Right.
and I can't remember what it costs. It costs $20 or $40 or whatever to do my family.
Right.
And then when I've put it all in, it says, well, let's see what you missed. And so it gives you all these things. Oh, you forgot to put this in, you forgot to put that in.
Right.
And then it will actually give you some suggestions like, well, why don't you have the charitable donations claimed by your wife instead of you, or something
Correct,
like
because
that.
there are certain things, those are the little tricks where one gets a benefit. There's certain things that are allowed to be claimed by one spouse or the other. So that's good to have on that.
Yeah, and
because-
if you have, kids, who's claiming the kids? My kids are older, so I don't get deductions for them anymore. But there are things like that. Now, an expert probably can do a better job than the computer because maybe there's more questions it could ask. But for my purposes, it's pretty simple. Once it's all done,
Right.
you've cleared all the error messages, and then it says, okay, do you want to e-file it? Yes, I do. You hit a button, and it e-files it, and you're done.
Correct.
And you can generate a PDF copy of it and go. So that's a program I'm familiar with, and I think some of the other ones that you mentioned would be,
TurboTax and all the different ones out there.
would be similar. And I like the web-based thing because then I don't have to be installing new software. It's always up to date. The difference between that and the programs that we use here. So mention the names. What programs?
So we use CanTax. We've also looked at tax prep recently, but these are much more expensive. They're meant for people who are doing thousands of returns. We'll do probably 3,000 returns this year.
Yeah,
So
and they're not question-based returns. They're boom. Here's the where you put the T4 in. You have to know what button to click to call it up.
Correct.
Now our team here, who does them? Nellie, Christina, Michelle.
Correct.
They've done thousands of them.
Correct.
So they can do a simple tax return in 4.5 minutes.
Which is quicker than for people who are experts at it, which is quicker for people who are doing that. Once again, if I had to install a light, I'd have to read the manual. It'd take me who knows how long to do it. An electrician could come in and do it much quicker.
Yeah.
So very similar concept, right? It goes back to the expertise. The people who are experts use a less of a question-based program. But you raised a good point. The questions are what fills out that. So people who are comfortable and want to try it on their own, the question-based programs are perfect. Make sure if you're actually going to see somebody at HR Block or one of the other Liberty, all the different places, make sure you're having them ask you the similar questions. Every question should drive an answer for it. If you walk in with one slip, make sure they ask you to make sure you're not missing anything else. If you're paying rent, you might get the Trillium benefit. So there's many different parts. Make sure the questions are being asked. So the downfall is if you go to somebody and pay for it, if they don't ask you questions, they might have missed something.
Yeah, because they are kind of doing the same process that the computer is
100%.
doing, asking a bunch of questions.
Correct.
So, okay, so let's do the practical advice section then here. What advice would you give someone who is looking for a tax preparer? So we've already talked about the software angle. If you feel you've got the time, the expertise to do it yourself, fantastic. It'll definitely be cheaper, and you'll actually have a pretty good understanding of how your taxes work. So I think that's a good thing. But let's say no, I want someone else to do it. Maybe I'm in a complex situation. What advice would you give me to find someone to do my taxes for me?
Ask questions. Look around. Ask your friends. Who do you use? Ask people in your industry. So if you are somebody in the trucking industry, and I'm saying them because they have lots of special things. They're traveling all the time. They get allowances. There's special rules for people in the transportation industry. Ask your other friends where do they go? Which accounting firm do they use to do that, or which tax preparer? So ask around. Ask for referrals. Call people. Ask them questions. What's involved? Do a little bit of homework. This is investing into your situation, into your reducing your tax debt, or into increasing your refunds. So make sure you ask a lot of questions. Look for reviews. Go online, ask reviews, that kind of stuff. So ask a lot of people for questions and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and in my experience, every industry has a few people who are the guys or the girls in that industry. So in the trucking industry, I'm sure in Kitchener or Toronto or whatever town you're in, there's 5 people who do all the truck drivers in town. They know exactly what the system is. and they can bang them out really quickly and never miss anything.
Because they got the checklist that asks the right questions for that industry. So if I walked in there, their questions wouldn't be geared to me, but they are definitely geared to people in the transport industry to ensure that they don't miss any credits.
Yeah, so ask your friends and coworkers in your industry who they use, and that would be a pretty good indication. If they're happy with them, then great. And this isn't something you have to do every single year. If they did a good job for your taxes last year, well, then great. They can just keep doing them.
Correct.
So that's where you want to go.
You should have that comfort. You should feel like you had it right. Because once again, if they do it wrong and the government gives you a refund and then they later on says, oh, hold on, that was wrong, we're going to reassess you, they'll reassess your taxes, which will reassess your child tax benefit, which will reassess your trillium, which the ripple effect kind of goes through that. So
it can be pretty expensive.
Correct. And there's many changes. I mean, the last 2 years we've got the climate change, because Ontario is part of the program with the federal government. So there's a $226 refund that individuals get there. So you want to make sure you're getting those things that do change periodically, or depends on the people in power.
Yeah, you got to tick the right boxes. So,
Correct.
I mean, some other advice that I would give people would be there is a middle ground here. I can give a shoebox full of receipts to my accountant and say, here, do everything. Or I can spend a few hours or a few minutes or whatever it takes to actually assemble them.
Right.
So if I'm a truck driver and I get to deduct meals or mileage or gas or whatever, well, here's all my gas receipts, here's my car insurance, here's whatever. If I summarize it all for the accountant, then all they have to do is take those numbers, verify them, and put them into the tax program, as opposed to giving them literally a shoebox full of receipts. It's going to take them a few hours to sort everything out. They don't know what's there, what's missed.
Right.
That's going to cost you a lot more money.
Yep.
So the more you can prepare on yourself, and do it throughout the year.
Correct.
Don't wait till the end of the year to try to assemble it. Have a folder for each month or whatever your system is, and that can keep the cost
Keep
down.
on top of it, keep the numbers there. You're right. In essence, a tax preparer is an hourly based type thing. If I'm having somebody come in and do work for me in my home, I want to make sure it's as set up as possible for them so they have to spend the least amount of time there. So if I have a plumber coming in, if I have everything all ready for them, their time that they're going to charge me will be less than if they have to come and do extra parts. Same applies to a tax preparer. The more you can have ready for them, the less time they need to spend
And it's
on
more likely you won't miss anything because you were assembling it yourself.
But you hit on a point earlier that a lot of people aren't aware of is you can actually have an online Revenue Canada account or Canada Revenue Agency account, which allows you to have access to your slips, which has access to when your credits are being paid, which has access to a lot of your information. I think everybody should have signed up for that. It's become much more user-friendly over the years. At one time, you could never get anything on Revenue Canada's or Canada Revenue Agency's website, but now it's all available for you. So as you said, you're able to just hit a button and upload your slips. You then can see when it's assessed. You can see credits. So I believe everybody should register for it, but it takes time.
I totally agree. So you go on to the CRA website, and it'll ask you some questions. What was on line 150 of last year's return? What's your name? What's your social insurance number? And then it will say, okay, we got to verify you are who you say you are. So we're going to send you a security code in the mail, an actual piece of paper.
Correct.
So that's where it takes time because, it takes a week or whatever to get there. And then when you get the code, you got to go back and punch it in. But once you're set up, that's a one-time thing.
Correct.
So now every year I've got access to it. So you're right. I can go in and my T4 is already there.
Yep.
RSP slips, whatever, can get sucked right in. And then when my tax return is assessed, my notice of assessment is right there. So I'm not waiting for them to send me something in the mail. I can see it. So
people get to see their child tax benefit when it's being paid. They get to see their HST credit. They get to see all the various things are on that. So I highly recommend people get signed up.
RSP deduction limits, TFSA limits, and whatnot. The TFSA and RSP limits are not updated in real time because, of course, your receipt may not have got into the system yet.
It's an annual number.
It's an annual number, but they're all there. So I totally agree. I think that's something you should do. Obviously, put a really good password with it and all the rest of it.
Right.
But I also believe once you pick the tax program you want to use or the tax preparer, keep using them every year because it's a lot easier to be rolling stuff forward. And
it's back to the time question. It's easier because it's already set up. You've already got that. You're spending less time reinventing the wheel.
Final question for you. And I know what your answer is going to be, so I'm just throwing you a lob ball here. Are you a big fan of cashback?
No.
No, you're not. So explain what cashback is.
So there are people that when you go to get your taxes done at the big providers, the ones that pop up during the tax season, they will say, okay, you're entitled to a $1,000 refund. Would you like $800 now? And people say, sure, I'll take that money. And they pay $200 for that.
And your tax return's free.
Yeah, and then it's instant access to that money. But you could have got more by waiting 10 days. Where else can you wait 10 days and make that kind of money? So a typical refund when it's filed without complexity, is returned to the person within 10 days of e-filing. So why
and
would
it's
you
going
pay?
right into your bank account.
Correct.
So you want to make sure your bank account is set up with CRA so they can deposit. They're not sending you a check or whatever.
Correct.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. If it's a $1,000 refund, and we're just making up numbers here, but if I had to pay $200 to get that $800 earlier,
Correct.
that's a massive expense.
Correct.
I mean, $200 out of a 1,000 is 20%, but that was 20 for 10 days.
Correct. And so it's just not worth it. Wait the 10 days. Don't get too big of a hurry. It's found money. It's not money that was coming in on a paycheck. Plan for it. Know when you're going to file your tax returns. Know it's going to be 10 days, 15 days after that you'll have access to that cash.
Yeah, and
so
build it into your budget. Okay, I'm going to have to pay $100 to get my taxes filed.
Correct.
So save up the money during the year or whatever. Correct. So rather than, I got to get my taxes, but I can't afford to pay for it. Oh, no problem. We'll just charge you a massive amount to discount it.
Well, and that's my problem with it. They're charging people who are tight, who that money could have went a long way towards groceries, car repairs, to the kids, to the different parts of it. So the people that are paying it are the ones that are in some ways very desperate for their money and are the ones that could use every extra penny.
Yeah, so we are not big fans of it. Plan in advance and then you don't have to worry about it. Excellent. Scott, thanks very much. I think we covered a lot of ground there. I mean, basically, if you're going to decide to do it yourself or not, take a look at the complexity of it, whether you've got the expertise to do it, how much time have you got to do it, and then who do you end up picking to do it if you want to go that way. Ask your friends what tax programs they're using. There's usually free trials of all of them. See which is going to work for you.
Don't let it scare you. Find the right person to help you, whether it's yourself or somebody else.
Yeah, because this is an important issue. You don't want to get behind on your taxes. You want to make sure you're getting the full refund that you're due,
correct.
which is great for all concerned.
Especially the people that owe money.
Yeah, you don't want to be paying penalties and interest. That's for sure.
Correct.
So, excellent, Scott. Thanks very much.
All right, thanks for having me.
That's our show for today. Thanks for listening. Until next week, I'm Doug Hoyes. That was Debt Free in 30.